I was flying to my brother's wedding when my housemaid called, terrified. Fake sick. Get off the plane, she begged. I thought she was crazy until she whispered they were in my room. The hum of the airplane engine was supposed to be a comforting sound. For me, it had always meant an escape, a transition from the heavy responsibilities of daily life to somewhere new. But as I sat in the first-class cabin waiting for takeoff, watching the ground crew load baggage through the small oval window, my chest felt tight. I am 30 years old, and I have always been the caretaker of my family. My name is Evelyn. Today, I was supposed to be flying to Aspen for the most important weekend of my younger brother's life. Cameron is 26, but in my eyes, he will always be the little boy I helped raise after our mother got sick. He is kind, deeply loyal, and almost dangerously trusting. He was getting married tomorrow. I should have been thrilled. I should have been drinking the complimentary sparkling water and flipping through a magazine, but I could not shake the heavy feeling settling in my stomach. The seat next to me was empty. It was supposed to belong to Julian, my husband of 5 years. Julian is 35, a senior sales director for a massive tech firm, and a man who always seemed to have the world on a string. He was charismatic, sharp, and usually the life of every family gathering. But 2 days ago, he came home looking deeply stressed. He told me that a catastrophic corporate crisis had erupted in their New York office. He said he had to fly out immediately to do damage control, and that he would absolutely not be able to make it to Cameron's wedding. He apologized profusely. He even bought a very expensive bottle of champagne and had it sent to Cameron's hotel room as a peace offering. I told him I understood. That is what a supportive wife does, right? You understand. You compromise. You trust the man you married. But over the last 6 months, trusting Julian had become an exercise in mental gymnastics. He had changed. It was not one big thing, but 100 little things that slowly built a wall of ice between us. He changed the passcode on his phone, claiming his company updated their security policies. He started taking evening walks around the neighborhood, something he had never done before, just to return calls. He even started using a new cologne, a sharp, musky scent that I had never bought for him. Whenever I brought up these changes, Julian would look at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. He would tell me I was working too hard, that my imagination was running wild, that I was letting my anxiety ruin the good life we had built. He was so convincing, so calm and rational, that I actually ended up apologizing to him. I convinced myself that I was being a paranoid wife. I pushed all my doubts deep down into a mental box, locked it, and threw away the key. I was going to my little brother's wedding. I was going to smile for the cameras, give a beautiful toast, and pretend my marriage was perfectly fine. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the headrest, trying to force my mind to quiet down. The captain's voice crackled through the overhead speakers, welcoming us aboard and announcing that the cabin doors were now closed. The flight attendant walked down the aisle, her voice cheerful but firm, reminding everyone to switch all devices to airplane mode. I reached into my purse to grab my phone, fully intending to turn off the cellular data. But just as my fingers brushed the screen, the phone began to vibrate violently in my hand. I looked at the caller identification. It was Rosa. Rosa is 50 years old, a hardworking immigrant woman who has been my housekeeper for the past 3 years. She is incredibly sweet, very traditional, and she treats my home as if it were her own. I helped her out with some legal fees a few years ago, and since then, she has been fiercely loyal to me. But Rosa never calls me. She only sends polite text messages about grocery lists or asking if she should water the indoor plants. Seeing her name on the screen, calling me not once, not twice, but 3 times in rapid succession, sent an immediate spike of adrenaline straight into my bloodstream. I hit the green button and brought the phone to my ear. Before I could even say hello, I heard the sound of her breathing. It was ragged, shallow, and filled with absolute terror. She was whispering, her voice shaking so badly I could barely understand her. "Miss Evelyn. Please, Miss Evelyn. Are you still on the ground?" I frowned, my heart suddenly beating a little faster. I told her yes, the plane was still at the gate, but the doors were closed. Listen to me, Rosa whispered, her voice cracking. You must get off that plane. Pretend you are sick. Fake a heart attack. Do whatever you have to do, but do not fly today. I let out a nervous laugh, thinking she was having some sort of anxiety attack. I tried to speak calmly to her, telling her that the doors were sealed and I could not just leave. But she cut me off. Her next words felt like a physical blow to my chest. He came back, Miss Evelyn. Your husband did not go to New York. He is here. In the house. The world around me seemed to stop spinning. The ambient noise of the cabin faded into a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I squeezed the phone tightly and asked her what she was talking about. Rosa was crying now. He brought someone with him. A woman. They went straight upstairs. They are in your bedroom right now. A cold sweat broke out across the back of my neck. My bedroom. The most private, sacred space in my life. The air in the cabin suddenly felt incredibly thin. I could not breathe. The flight attendant was suddenly standing next to my seat, giving me a polite but stern look, tapping her wrist to indicate I needed to end the call. I had a choice to make in a fraction of a second. I could stay in my seat, turn off my phone, fly 1,000 miles away, and spend the next 3 days agonizing over a phone call I could not investigate. Or I could get off this plane and face whatever nightmare was waiting for me in my own home. The thought of another woman in my bed, laughing with my husband while he thought I was trapped in the sky, triggered a primal, violent instinct inside me. I was not going to run. I dropped my phone onto the seat next to me. I bent forward, clutching my stomach with both hands, and let out a loud, agonizing groan. The flight attendant's stern expression vanished instantly, replaced by genuine alarm. I started taking short, desperate gasps of air. I forced myself to gag, a loud, ugly sound that made the passengers in the rows behind me murmur in concern. Ma'am? Are you all right? The flight attendant asked, leaning over me. I looked up at her, making sure my eyes were wide and frantic. I told her I was in severe pain, that I felt like my appendix was rupturing, and that I was going to be violently ill right there in the aisle. Panic is contagious. Within seconds, another attendant rushed over. They asked if there was a doctor on board. I kept groaning, squeezing my eyes shut, begging them to let me off the aircraft. The protocol for a medical emergency on a grounded plane is strict. They cannot keep a seriously ill passenger on board. The captain was notified. The ground crew was radioed. After what felt like an eternity of humiliating, agonizing acting, the heavy cabin doors were unlocked and pushed open. The cool air from the jet bridge rushed in. An airport medical staff member helped me up. I kept my head down, leaning heavily on the attendant as I walked back off the plane, ignoring the stares and whispers of the other passengers. The moment my feet hit the solid ground of the terminal, the fake pain vanished, replaced by a cold, hard numbness. I thanked the medical staff, told them it was just a severe panic attack mixed with food poisoning, and assured them I did not need an ambulance. I walked quickly away from the gate, disappearing into the crowd of travelers. The air conditioning of the airport bit into my skin. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It buzzed one final time before the signal dropped out near the terminal exit. It was a text message from Rosa. 5 words that chilled me to the bone. Please do not come alone. I stood in the middle of the busy terminal, completely frozen, staring at Rosa's message. Please do not come alone. What did that mean? Was he violent? Julian had never laid a hand on me in 5 years, but the man who was currently in my bedroom was not the husband I knew. He was a stranger. I immediately dialed Rosa's number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. By the 5th attempt, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone on the polished airport floor. She was not answering. Either she was hiding or Julian had found her. My mind started racing, trying to form a logical plan. If I just jumped in a taxi and went home, Julian might check his phone. We had a family location tracking app installed on our devices. He insisted on it a year ago for safety reasons. If he checked the app and saw my little blue dot moving away from the airport and heading back toward our suburban house instead of flying to Aspen, he would know I was coming. He would have time to hide the woman, clean up the evidence, and spin a beautiful, elaborate lie to make me look like a crazy, paranoid wife coming home to ruin his quiet weekend. I could not let that happen. I needed the element of total surprise. I walked swiftly toward the airport convenience stores. I found an electronics kiosk and grabbed a cheap, prepaid cellular phone in a plastic blister pack. A burner phone. I paid for it in cash. I tore the plastic open as I walked out toward the ground transportation hub. I took my real phone, the one linked to Julian's tracking app, and looked around. There was a line of regional shuttle buses idling at the curb. One of them had a digital sign reading Milwaukee Express. The luggage compartment on the side of the bus was wide open, waiting for passengers to load their bags. Looking around to make sure no one was paying attention to me, I walked past the bus and casually tossed my real phone deep into the back corner of the dark luggage compartment. The doors would close. The bus would drive north. If Julian checked my location in an hour, he would see my phone moving hundreds of miles away, completely aligning with the illusion that I was traveling. I hailed a taxi at the very end of the line. I climbed into the back seat, the leather worn and smelling faintly of stale coffee and vanilla air freshener. I gave the driver an intersection about 2 miles away from my actual neighborhood. As the taxi pulled away from the curb and merged onto the highway, the reality of my situation finally sat down next to me in the dark car. My husband was cheating on me. In our house. The betrayal tasted like pennies in my mouth. The highway lights flickered in a rhythmic pattern through the taxi window, casting long shadows across the back seat. I was staring blankly at the back of the driver's head restraint when my wrist vibrated. My smartwatch. I had forgotten to take it off. It must have downloaded the latest messages through the airport wireless network just before I threw my phone into the bus. I lifted my wrist. The small screen glowed in the dark cabin. It was an image file sent from Rosa. I tapped the screen to open the picture. The resolution on the watch was small, but the details were sharp enough to shatter whatever tiny, pathetic shred of denial I still had left. The photo was taken from the hallway, peeking through the partially open door of my master bedroom. The lighting was unmistakable. It was my room. My sanctuary. But the focus of the picture was not the expensive oak furniture or the carefully chosen bedding. It was the woman standing in the center of the frame. Her back was turned to the camera. Her dark hair was wet, clinging to her shoulders, meaning she had just used my personal shower. She was wearing a robe. Not just any robe. It was the custom cream-colored silk robe Julian had bought me for our anniversary last year. He had told me it was a symbol of his exclusive love for me. And now another woman was wearing it, wrapping herself in my things. But that was not the worst part. The woman was standing at my antique vanity table. Her hands were moving through my open jewelry box. She was casually, comfortably looking through my most precious belongings. My stomach violently turned. I felt a wave of nausea that was very real this time. This was not a quick, guilty mistake in a cheap motel room. This was a deliberate, comfortable invasion of my entire existence. She was not rushing. She did not look afraid of being caught. She felt at home. The sheer disrespect of it felt like a physical violation. Julian was not just cheating on me, he was giving away my life to someone else. I zoomed in on the watch screen, my finger trembling. I tried to look for a reflection in the vanity mirror, trying to see her face, but the angle was wrong. All I could see was the wet hair and the curve of her jaw. Who is she? A coworker? A random woman from a bar? The mystery made the anger burn hotter in my chest. I took a deep, ragged breath, pulling the vanilla-scented air into my lungs. I closed my eyes. The image burned into the back of my eyelids. That was the exact moment the weeping, heartbroken wife inside me died. I did not want to cry anymore. I wanted to destroy him. I picked up the cheap burner phone I had just bought. I dialed a number I knew entirely by memory. It belonged to my older cousin, Valerie. Valerie is 38 years old and arguably the most ruthless, brilliant divorce attorney in the city. She does not do empathy. She does strategy. She eats lying husbands for breakfast and leaves their bank accounts empty by lunch. She answered on the second ring, her voice sharp and professional. Speak. I did not bother saying hello. My voice was eerily calm, devoid of the panic I had felt just 20 minutes ago at the airport. I told her everything. I told her about Julian's fake business trip, Rosa's terrifying phone call, the trick with the shuttle bus, and the picture on my smartwatch. I told her there was a strange woman wearing my clothes and going through my jewelry. Valerie was completely silent for a full 10 seconds. I could hear the faint sound of her typing on a keyboard in the background. When she finally spoke, her tone was pure ice. "All right, Evelyn. Listen to me very carefully. You are entering a war zone, and the first casualty of war is always emotion. Do not go into that house screaming. Do not throw a vase. Do not demand an explanation. If you confront a narcissist without a loaded gun, they will gaslight you into believing you pulled the trigger on yourself." Her words hit me like a splash of freezing water. She was absolutely right. I closed my eyes and let the memories flood in. The gaslighting. The subtle, quiet ways Julian had manipulated my reality over the past year. I remembered finding a restaurant receipt for 2 dinners on a night he claimed he was working late. When I asked him about it, he did not just deny it. He turned it around on me. He looked at me with such profound disappointment and said, "Evelyn, my assistant accidentally put her lunch on my corporate card. The fact that you are digging through my pockets trying to find a reason to fight is exactly why I do not want to come home sometimes. You are suffocating me." He had spoken with such conviction that I actually felt guilty. I had apologized for violating his privacy. I had bought him a gift to make up for my crazy behavior. The memory made my blood run hot. He had trained me to doubt my own mind. He had conditioned me to be the quiet, trusting, compliant wife while he paraded another woman through my bedroom. "I am not going to scream, Valerie," I said into the cheap plastic phone. "I want to ruin him." "Good girl," Valerie replied. "Tell your driver to drop you off 3 blocks away from your house. Walk the rest of the way in the shadows. Keep out of sight. I am leaving my office right now. I will meet you in the alley behind your neighbor's house in 20 minutes. We are going to collect the evidence, and then we are going to bury him under it." I hung up the phone. I looked out the window. The suburban houses were starting to appear, their warm porch lights looking like a mockery of domestic peace. I leaned forward and tapped the plastic divider. "Excuse me, driver," I said, my voice steady and cold. "Could you actually stop at the next corner? This is as far as I go. Please take a second to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me what city you are watching from. Every comment helps this video reach more people. Thank you so much." The taxi pulled over at the corner of Elm Street and Maple Drive, exactly 3 blocks away from the home I shared with Julian. I handed the driver a $50 bill, told him to keep the change, and stepped out into the chilly night air. The suburban street was dead quiet. The kind of quiet that usually made me feel safe, but tonight, it felt suffocating. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows on the pavement as I walked briskly under the canopy of old oak trees. I kept my head down, pulling my coat tighter around my shoulders. Every time a car drove past, my heart hammered against my ribs, terrified that Julian might be looking out of a window, or worse, that he was driving around looking for me. But of course he was not. He thought I was 30,000 feet in the air. I reached the narrow alleyway that ran behind the large, 2-story houses on my street. It was unpaved and smelled like damp earth and pine needles. I navigated carefully in the dark until I saw the familiar outline of my neighbor's tall cedar fence. Crouching low, I slipped through a gap in the shrubs and found myself looking directly at the back of my own house. The patio lights were off, but the large bay window of our master bedroom on the 2nd floor was glowing with a warm, golden light. A figure detached itself from the shadows near the oak tree. I gasped, stumbling backward, but a firm hand grabbed my arm. It was Valerie. She was wearing a dark trench coat, her hair pulled back into a tight bun, and her expression was harder than granite. She did not hug me. She did not offer me a shoulder to cry on. She just pointed up at the glowing window. "Look," Valerie whispered, her voice barely carrying over the wind. I followed her gaze. The sheer curtains were drawn, but the interior lights were bright enough to cast perfect silhouettes against the fabric. I saw him. Julian. His tall, broad-shouldered frame was unmistakable. He was holding 2 wine glasses. And then another silhouette appeared. A woman, much shorter than me, moving with a kind of fluid, relaxed grace. She walked up to Julian, took a glass from his hand, and tilted her head back to laugh. Even through the double-paned glass and the distance of the backyard, I could hear the faint, muffled sound of her giggling. A wave of pure, unadulterated hatred washed over me. It was so intense it actually made my hands stop shaking. This was my home. The house I had spent 2 years decorating, picking out every piece of furniture, planting the garden, building a life. And he had turned it into a cheap motel for his amusement. I remembered how Julian used to demand absolute quiet in the house whenever he was stressed from work. He would snap at me if I played music too loudly or if I invited friends over. Yet here he was, drinking wine and laughing with a stranger in our bedroom, entirely unbothered. The hypocrisy burned my throat. I looked at Valerie. She was watching my face closely, waiting to see if I would break down. I did not. I just gave her a slow, cold nod. I was ready. Just as Valerie was about to lay out the plan, a metallic click echoed from the patio deck. Someone was unlocking the sliding glass door from the outside. I panicked, ready to run, but Valerie pulled me down behind the tall hedges. A man stepped out from the shadows of our covered porch. He was wearing dark work clothes and carrying a heavy canvas tool bag. He looked around cautiously before jogging lightly down the lawn toward us. As he got closer, I recognized him. It was Gavin, Rose's older brother. Gavin was an independent contractor who specialized in high-end home security and smart wiring. When Julian and I bought this house 4 years ago, Julian insisted on having top-of-the-line security cameras installed everywhere except the bedrooms and bathrooms. Gavin was the one who wired the entire system. "Gavin?" I whispered as he crouched down next to us. He gave me a grim, apologetic look. "Miss Evelyn, I am so sorry about all this. Rosa called me an hour ago, crying hysterically. She unlocked the basement storm door for me before she locked herself in the laundry room. She told me what was happening upstairs." "Did he see you?" Valerie asked sharply, cutting straight to the point. "No," Gavin replied, unzipping his tool bag. "He is too busy upstairs. I bypassed the main network hub in the basement. Julian thinks he is a genius because he controls the house from his phone, but he does not understand how the local storage works. I tapped directly into the hard drive of the security mainframe. I also managed to access the backup logs from his home office tablet. It is synced to his phone's cloud, meaning every text message he sent or received while connected to the home wireless network is saved there." I stared at Gavin, feeling a profound sense of gratitude mixed with absolute horror. My husband was a tech executive, but his arrogance had left him vulnerable. Gavin pulled a small, silver flash drive from his pocket and handed it to Valerie. I pulled the last 48 hours of camera footage from the downstairs hallway, the kitchen, and the living room, Gavin explained, his voice low and professional. "I also pulled the text logs from the last 3 months. It is all on this drive. I have to go back and reset the basement panel so the system does not show an error code on his phone. Please, Miss Evelyn, get my sister out of there safely." I promised him I would. Gavin nodded, picked up his bag, and melted back into the darkness. Valerie held up the silver flash drive like it was a weapon. It caught the faint moonlight. "Knowledge is power, Evelyn," Valerie said quietly. "But evidence is a guillotine. Let us go see exactly whose head we are chopping off." We retreated quietly through the alley and walked the 3 blocks back to where Valerie had parked her luxury sedan. We got into the car. The leather seats were freezing. Valerie turned the engine on just enough to run the battery, but left the headlights off. She opened the center console, pulled out a sleek silver laptop, and booted it up. My chest felt like it was going to cave in. In a few seconds, I was going to see the face of the woman who was destroying my life. Valerie plugged the flash drive into the side of the laptop. The screen illuminated the dark cabin of the car, casting a harsh, pale light on our faces. A folder popped up on the desktop containing several video files and a massive text document. Valerie clicked on the video file labeled Front Hallway Camera, 7:30 p.m. The video loaded. It was black and white night vision footage of my front entryway. Julian walked into the frame, carrying his leather overnight bag. He looked completely relaxed. A moment later, the front door opened again, and a woman walked in. She was carrying a small suitcase. She had her back to the camera as Julian helped her take off her coat. Then, she turned around to face the lens. The air vanished from my lungs. The world stopped. My hands went completely numb. It was Nina. Nina, Cameron's fiancée. The sweet, innocent, 25-year-old kindergarten teacher who was supposed to be walking down the aisle in exactly 18 hours to marry my baby brother. The woman who had cried in my arms 2 weeks ago, thanking me for helping her pick out the perfect floral arrangements. The woman who told Cameron she needed to spend 2 days at a wellness spa to detox her skin before the wedding. Oh my God, Valerie breathed out, her professional composure cracking for the first time. Evelyn, that is Cameron's girl. I could not speak. The betrayal was no longer just about me. It was a spear driven directly through my family's heart. Cameron worshipped the ground Nina walked on. He worked 60-hour weeks to afford the ridiculous destination wedding she demanded. And while he was in Aspen right now, probably rehearsing his vows, she was in my house, sleeping with my husband. Valerie closed the video and opened the text document. It was a raw log of synced messages between Julian and Nina. I read the words on the screen, feeling a sickness so deep it felt terminal. Julian, flight to New York story worked perfectly. Evelyn bought it completely. Nina, I cannot believe we are doing this. If Cameron finds out, he will die. Julian, he will not find out. The kid is too naive for his own good. And Evelyn is so obsessed with playing the perfect wife, she would not see a red flag if it slapped her in the face. Just get here. I have the house to myself all weekend. Nina, I am getting in the taxi now. God, I hate this stupid spa lie, but it is worth it. See you in an hour. Have my wine ready. They had been planning this for months. There were messages dating back to Thanksgiving, referencing hotel meetups during their lunch breaks, inside jokes about how clueless Cameron was, and complaints from Nina about how annoying my family's wedding traditions were. They were not just cheating. They were actively mocking us. They considered us collateral damage in their twisted game. I leaned my head against the cold glass of the car window. The tears finally came, not for my marriage, but for my brother. I imagined Cameron standing at the altar tomorrow, smiling, completely unaware that his entire life was a joke to the two people he trusted most. Evelyn, Valerie said softly, her hand resting on my shoulder. We can call the police and have her removed for trespassing. We can handle this quietly. I wiped my face. The tears stopped. A terrifying, absolute calm washed over me. The sadness was gone, entirely burned away by a protective, violent rage. I turned to look at my cousin. No, I said, my voice steady and dark. If we do it quietly, they will lie. Julian will manipulate the narrative. Nina will cry and tell Cameron I am crazy. I will not let them control the story. We are going to go inside, Valerie. And we are going to burn their world to the ground while they are standing in it. Valerie did not argue. She recognized the look in my eyes. It was the same look our grandfather had when someone crossed the family line. She immediately went into legal execution mode. While I sat in silence, Valerie rapidly organized the files on the laptop. She created a single, condensed digital folder. Inside it, she placed the clearest screenshot of Nina from the security camera, 3 pages of the most damning text messages highlighting their mockery of Cameron, and the hotel receipts Gavin had scraped from Julian's tablet. She uploaded the folder to a secure cloud drive and generated a single, shareable internet link. All right, Valerie said, closing the laptop and grabbing her phone. The trap is set. I have the link copied to my clipboard. All I have to do is hit paste and send. Do you have your key? I reached into my pocket and pulled out my heavy brass house key. I nodded. We stepped out of the car and walked the 3 blocks back to my house. The wind had picked up, howling through the trees, masking the sound of our footsteps on the pavement. We bypassed the front door, avoiding the doorbell camera, and walked around to the side of the house where the mudroom entrance was. I slid the key into the lock. I turned it with agonizing slowness, waiting for the heavy deadbolt to click. It made a soft, metallic thud. I pushed the door open, wincing as the hinges gave a faint squeak. We stepped inside, into the darkness of the mudroom. The air in the house was warm, smelling of expensive red wine and the sharp, musky cologne Julian had started wearing. We moved silently through the dining room. My eyes adjusted to the dim light. I saw the physical disrespect scattered across my home. A half-empty bottle of wine was left on my antique mahogany dining table without a coaster, leaving a dark purple ring on the wood. A pair of black high heels, Nina's cheap, tasteless shoes, were kicked off haphazardly right next to the beautiful, hand-woven wedding gift baskets my mother had spent 3 weeks preparing for Cameron's guests. The sheer audacity of it made my jaw clench so hard my teeth ached. Valerie tapped my shoulder and pointed toward the kitchen. The lights under the cabinets were glowing softly. I could hear the faint sound of jazz music playing from the smart speaker on the counter. And layered over the music, I heard voices. I walked down the short hallway, my footsteps completely silenced by the thick runner rug. Valerie was right behind me, her phone already out, the screen glowing faintly in her hand. We reached the archway that separated the hallway from the large, open-concept kitchen. I stopped. I did not hide. I just stood perfectly still in the center of the archway, letting my eyes take in the scene. Julian was leaning back against the marble island counter, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking completely relaxed. Standing between his legs, her arms wrapped tightly around his neck, was Nina. She was still wearing my cream silk anniversary robe. It was tied loosely around her waist, slipping off one shoulder. They were kissing. It was not a quick, secret kiss. It was deep, comfortable, and lazy. The kind of kiss people share when they believe they are completely safe from the consequences of the world. I did not scream. I did not drop my purse to make a dramatic noise. I just stood there, watching them desecrate my life, and I waited for them to notice me. It took 5 agonizing seconds. Julian shifted his weight, opening his eyes just slightly. His gaze drifted past Nina's shoulder and landed directly on me. For a fraction of a second, I saw his brain completely short-circuit. The blood instantly drained from his face, leaving him looking like a terrified ghost. He froze, his hands gripping Nina's waist so hard she flinched. Nina pulled back, confused by his sudden stiffness. She turned her head, following his line of sight. When Nina saw me standing there in my winter coat, her mouth fell open. She let out a sharp, pathetic gasp, like a fish pulled out of water. She instinctively grabbed the lapels of my robe and pulled them tightly across her chest, stumbling backward away from Julian until her back hit the refrigerator. "Evelyn," Julian choked out. His voice cracked. It was the first time in 5 years I had ever heard my husband sound genuinely, utterly terrified. "Hello, Julian," I said. My voice was perfectly flat, completely devoid of emotion. I sounded like a stranger. I stepped fully into the kitchen, the harsh overhead lights casting long shadows across the floor. Valerie stepped in right beside me, holding her phone up, her thumb hovering over the screen. "Hey, Nina," I added, looking at the trembling 25-year-old. "Nice robe. It looks a little big on you." Nina could not speak. She was hyperventilating, her eyes darting frantically toward the back door, calculating if she could run. But Julian was a master of corporate crisis management. I watched his brain reboot. I watched him bury the panic and desperately try to assemble a defense strategy out of thin air. He stood up straight, smoothing down his shirt, adopting the calm, authoritative tone he used to negotiate million-dollar contracts. "Evelyn, honey," Julian said, taking a slow step toward me, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "I know how this looks. I swear to you, I know exactly how bad this looks. But you need to calm down and let me explain. You are jumping to conclusions." I crossed my arms. I did not interrupt him. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear exactly how stupid he thought I was. "My flight to New York got canceled while I was at the gate," Julian lied smoothly, his eyes locking onto mine with practiced sincerity. Total mechanical failure. I was coming home to surprise you before you flew out. But right as I pulled into the driveway, Nina called me. She was having a massive panic attack about the wedding. A total breakdown. She said she could not go through with it, and she needed someone to talk to who understood the family dynamic. Nina, catching onto his desperate lifeline, immediately started nodding, forcing tears into her eyes. Yes, Evelyn, I am so sorry. I was just so overwhelmed. I did not want to bother Cameron, he has been so stressed. Exactly, Julian continued, gaining confidence as he wove his masterpiece of garbage. She drove over here in a panic. When she arrived, she was crying so hard she spilled an entire glass of red wine all over her dress. She was freezing. I told her to go upstairs and take a quick shower to calm down, and I let her borrow your robe because her clothes were ruined. I was just giving her a hug to comfort her, Evelyn. I swear on my life. That is all it was. You know me. I love you. He stood there, looking at me with big, earnest eyes, expecting me to fold. Expecting me to second-guess my own reality, just like he had trained me to do for the past year. He expected me to apologize for accusing him. I let the silence stretch. I let the ticking of the kitchen clock echo in the room. I looked at Julian. Then I looked at Nina, who was actively pretending to wipe away tears of anxiety. The sheer audacity of their lies was almost impressive. I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile a predator gives right before it snaps the trap shut. You spilled wine on your dress? I asked, looking at Nina. Nina nodded eagerly. Yes, it is in the laundry basket. That is fascinating, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. Because the text message you sent Julian at 3 o'clock today said you were faking a spa trip so you could come over here and sleep with him while I was flying to Aspen. And the security camera footage shows you walking through the front door perfectly dry, carrying an overnight bag. But please tell me more about the wine. The absolute silence that followed my words was deafening. The color drained from Nina's face once again, turning her skin a sickly, ashen gray. Julian's confident posture shattered instantly. His jaw went slack and his hands dropped to his sides. He realized, in that split second, that he was utterly and completely trapped. The narrative control he relied on had been ripped out of his hands. Before anyone else tries to lie, Valerie announced, her voice echoing sharply against the marble countertops. She took a step forward, holding her phone up for them to see. Just know that everything in the past 5 minutes has been recorded. Furthermore, we have pulled the local data from your smart home network, Julian. We have your security camera footage. We have your synced text logs. We have the hotel receipts from November. You are legally, socially, and financially cooked. Julian looked at Valerie, his eyes widening in horror as he recognized my ruthless attorney cousin. He took a desperate step toward me. Evelyn, please. Do not do this. Do not let her get involved. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. Please, think about our marriage. I am not thinking about our marriage, I said coldly. Our marriage died a long time ago. I am thinking about Cameron. At the sound of his name, Nina let out a choked sob. She fell to her knees, burying her face in her hands, the stolen robe pooling around her on the floor. Please, Evelyn, no. I beg you. Do not tell him. It was a mistake. Julian manipulated me. I love Cameron. Please, you will destroy him. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the large tablet device Gavin had handed me before he left. I unlocked the screen. You are right, Nina. He will be destroyed. But he deserves to know who he is standing next to at the altar. I turned the tablet around so the bright screen was facing them. It was an active, live FaceTime video call. I had initiated it right before stepping into the kitchen. On the screen was Cameron. He was sitting on the edge of his hotel bed in Aspen, wearing his pajamas. His face was entirely pale, his eyes wide and completely hollow. He had been on the line the entire time. He had heard Julian's pathetic lies. He had heard my revelation about the texts. He had heard Nina admit it. Cam, Nina screamed, crawling toward the tablet, her hands reaching out as if she could touch him through the glass. Cam, Baby, listen to me, I am so sorry. Cameron did not yell. He did not curse. He just stared at the woman he was supposed to marry, his expression hardening into something cold and unrecognizable. He looked past her, looking directly into the camera lens at me. "Thank you, Evelyn," Cameron whispered, his voice cracking with a devastation that broke my heart. "Thank you for saving me." Then, the screen went black. He hung up. Nina collapsed onto the hardwood floor, wailing uncontrollably. It was an ugly, guttural sound of pure panic. Her dream wedding, her reputation, her entire future had just vanished in the span of 30 seconds. Julian, realizing that pleading was useless, let his mask slip completely. The charming, apologetic husband vanished, replaced by the cornered, aggressive narcissist I always knew was hiding underneath. His face turned dark red, the veins popping out on his neck. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You vindictive bitch," Julian snarled, his voice low and vicious. "You think you won? You think you can just burn my life down without consequences? If you try to take this public, if you try to ruin my career with this illegally obtained garbage, I will tie you up in court for the next decade. I will take this house. I will leave you with nothing. Do not ruin my life over a stupid mistake." I stood my ground. I did not flinch. I felt an incredible, soaring sense of liberation. I was not afraid of him anymore. He was just a pathetic, lying man standing in a kitchen, holding onto the illusion of power. I looked him dead in the eye and laughed. It was a soft, sharp, liberating sound. "I am not ruining your life, Julian," I said, my voice cutting through his threats like a knife. "I am just providing the audience. You ruined your own life the second you brought her into my house." I turned my head slightly toward my cousin. "Valerie, do it." Valerie smiled, a cold, terrifying smirk. She looked down at her phone. "Sending now," she said cheerfully. She tapped the screen. The digital dossier, the link containing the security footage, the mocking text messages, the hotel receipts, and the confession, was instantly transmitted. Valerie had not just sent it to Cameron. She sent it to the massive, 70-person wedding coordination group chat. The chat included our parents, Cameron's groomsmen, Nina's bridesmaids, her extremely conservative parents, the wedding planner, and, as a special bonus, Julian's boss, who was an old family friend invited to the ceremony. It took exactly 3 seconds for the shockwave to hit. First, Nina's phone, sitting on the kitchen counter, buzzed violently. Then Julian's phone buzzed. Then, a cacophony of rings, pings, and notification chimes erupted from both of their devices simultaneously. The calls were pouring in. The messages were exploding. The truth was out there, spreading like wildfire, burning away every lie they had ever told. Julian stared at his vibrating phone as if it were a live grenade. He slowly reached out and picked it up. I watched the realization wash over his face as he saw the name of his boss flashing on the incoming caller identification. His career was over. His social standing was obliterated. The perfect life he had so carefully curated was reduced to ash in a matter of seconds. Nina was still sobbing on the floor, ignoring her phone as it rang endlessly. She was a ghost, haunting the ruins of a life she threw away for nothing. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel happy. I just felt incredibly, wonderfully light. The heavy burden of doubt, anxiety, and manipulation that had crushed my chest for the past year was completely gone. "Rosa," I called out loudly, knowing she was still hiding in the basement. A moment later, the basement door creaked open. Rosa peeked her head out, her eyes red from crying, holding a heavy frying pan in her hand like a weapon. When she saw me standing tall and Julian completely defeated, she let out a massive sigh of relief. "Rosa, please pack a bag with my toiletries and a week's worth of clothes," I said calmly. "I will be staying at Valerie's house until the divorce papers are finalized. Leave the silk robe. It belongs to the trash now." Rosa nodded vigorously, glaring at Julian before hurrying upstairs. I turned around, pulled my coat tightly around myself, and walked out the front door. I did not look back. I stepped out into the freezing night air, Valerie right beside me. The wind was still howling, but it did not feel cold anymore. It felt clean. I had lost my marriage tonight, but I had found myself and I had saved my brother. Sometimes, justice does not roar. Sometimes, it is the quiet click of a sent message, exposing the truth to the light. Was I wrong to expose them so ruthlessly? Some people in Julian's family later texted me, saying I was cruel for making it a public spectacle and ruining Nina's life forever. Should I have handled it behind closed doors, or did I do exactly what a big sister should do? Let me know in the comments below. You are the jury now. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next story.